Interleukin-4, also called IL-4, is an important cytokine, or signaling molecule involved in the immune response. IL-4 promotes Th2 cell proliferation and IgE production. In this video, I'll give you my visual mnemonic to remember all the key facts about IL-4. Phew! It's Friday night and the weekend is finally here. I'm excited to go home and eat the leftover sushi from lunch. Jetting out of my office building, I put my hands forward to push open the interlocking doors in front of me. Wait a minute. Interlocking doors? Since interlocking objects are our recurring symbol for the interleukins, this set of interlocking doors is here to anchor you to interleukin-4. Get it? Interlocking for interleukin, and door for the number 4. Interleukins are a class of cytokines, or cell signaling molecules important for immune function. IL-4 is a specific type of cytokine with important functions, which we'll talk about through our other symbols. On my way to the parking lot, I noticed a shoe donation bin right in front of the door. There's also a helper there, volunteering his time to help those who can't afford shoes. You know how there's always volunteers for shoe drives and other clothing donations outside these double doors? Since donating shoes to the bin is meant to help people, this helper shoe bin should remind you of Th2 cells, or T helper cells type 2. You know, since helper represents, well, helper T cells, and shoe is our recurring rhyme for the number 2, right? And this helper shoe bin is here in front of our interlocking door to help you remember that IL-4 is produced mainly by Th2 cells. Th2 cells are a type of helper T cell that releases IL-4 when activated. Now that we know where IL-4 comes from, let's move on now to discuss its specific functions. Now, let's take a look at the eel sushi in my hand. Must be leftovers from the office lunch. But this eel is cut in such a way that it looks Y-shaped, kind of like an antibody. This antibody-shaped eel happens to be our symbol for the IgE antibody. Get it? It's antibody-shaped to help you remember that it's an immunoglobulin, the fancy term for an antibody. And eel is here to remind you of the letter E, since E sounds like eel. IL-4's primary function is to increase levels of IgE. It does this by stimulating B cells and causing them to undergo class switching to IgE. Essentially, B cells change the type of antibody they make from the default IgM to IgE. We have an entire scene dedicated to IgE, but in short, IgE plays a major role in the immune response against parasitic worms, or helminths. Therefore, IL-4 is important for defense against parasitic worms, because it increases production of IgE. Got that? Let's move on. Alright, let's actually pivot back to the helper shoe bin again. Want to know something cool? Th2 helper T cells produce IL-4, but one of the targets of IL-4 is the T cells themselves. That is, IL-4 causes the native T cells to differentiate into the Th2 subtype. And since the Th2 subtype will produce more IL-4, causing differentiation of even more Th2 cells, this leads to a positive feedback loop. These positive feedback loops are actually quite common in immunology. These essentially amplify the immune response, enabling a big response after detecting a threat. Let's consider an example to illustrate. Say you are infected with a worm, and one of your antigen-presenting cells takes a piece of this worm and gives it to the Th2 T helper cell in the lymph node, activating it. This Th2 cell then makes IL-4, which causes a B cell to produce IgE. Problem is, the amount of IgE produced by a few B cells is too little to deal with a full-on worm infection. This is why IL-4 also causes more T cells to become Th2 cells, which together produce a ton of IL-4. This massive amount of IL-4 causes a ton of B cells to get involved, making a lot of IgE. This large amount of IgE is then able to fight the worm infection. To remember this positive feedback loop, just think how people who help once by donating shoes will probably do so again in the future. Alternatively, you can just remember the physiology I just talked about. After all, physiology is the best mnemonic, right? All right, I'm ready for the weekend. Let's summarize IL-4 and get out of here. Interleukin 4, or IL-4 for short, is a cytokine produced by Th2 cells. IL-4 promotes proliferation of Th2 cells, causing a positive feedback loop of more IL-4 and Th2 cells. The final goal of IL-4 is stimulating B cells to produce IgE, which is critical in the immune response against parasitic worms, as well as in diseases like asthma. That's all for IL-4. We'll see you in the next one.